Good evening and welcome to Zion's Banner. All right. Seeing some folks starting to file into the room. Please check the comments above. You will see that a virtual Messiah in the Passover is planned via a Zoom meeting, and it will be streamed also to our chosen people prayer team / team member group. So we've been asked to do that, to consider doing a group, and it's a actual page. And so it'll be streamed there, but it'll also be live Zoom. It's one of two that I'm doing. It's the first time I've done this. I've had stuff streaming where I've been in the church, but I'm using my own stuff and I'm using Zoom. I hope to do a lot more with Zoom and learn as I go along. Radical Love says, is a history of the Jewish people in the time of Jesus Christ. And yes, it is a worthwhile resource. So if you guys are in the chat and you see that book, it is an expensive resource, but it's good for background information. And so, yes, I would recommend that particular book that's actually there. So for interested people, we're going to kind of get started, but I wanted to point your attention to that virtual Passover Seder that we're doing. And I'm planning to do more with a Zoom linked to YouTube, because I discovered you can do that. But it takes a little more to do an event than a live broadcast. So I'm having to learn my way around this a little bit. And so for a while, I'll be using Manycam, and I'll figure out how to do that as far as the encoding goes. But that will give people the chance to interact even more. Thumbs up on the question that I'd like to ask the folks out there. If I did a after broadcast on another day Zoom meeting with those of you who just want that could be a Q&A or an open meeting. If folks would be interested, please post that in the comments, because I can now do that via Zoom. Something that might come up, some are concerned about the security of Zoom. There are some problems with it. If I did a closed broadcast for you folks, I could attach a password which would prevent hacking for the most part. It's still safe for you. I'd be the one that would probably be taking a risk. I'm in the evangelism business. Hey, if you're going and doing your mosque outreach and you're going out on the streets, you're taking a bit of a risk. So I don't want to be foolhardy, but I want to make use of the new tool that our mission board has given us and that I've been encouraged to learn. And once I learn a new tool, I really like to use it. And so I want to get the most out of this that I can. I will let you in on a secret, folks. The ability to use my Zoom account for the missions board is coming out of my missions funds. But we were encouraged to do it because of the meetings we're having and because we can use it as a tool to do a Seder and other online teaching, as well as calling people up and praying with them. And so I'm probably going to take a few shots with that and do the best I can, trust God, and go ahead and password where I can. The encrypting question is that it is not encrypted quite the way they say it is. So it's not unencrypted. It's not encrypted other than being TLS encrypted. So it's not end-to-end encrypted, and they're working on that. Come see, come saw. You know, I will do the best with it I can, but it's a neat tool to have in my arsenal, and I'd hate to waste God moving me that direction. So, question about Dr. Michael Brown. When it comes to Jewish apologetics, I use Dr. Michael Brown's material, and you'll notice that. He is the foremost and forerunner of apologetics as it deals with Judaism. So he is the one that's done the most work. He carved the path for us. Very good. Some of his other views, maybe I'm a little bit wondering about these days because I've heard some things here and there, but I haven't nailed anything down. I would say apologetics wise, I have his complete 5-book set. It's also on Logos. It's absolutely wonderful. We've gone over some of the objections and some of his material's been there. He also accesses the original Talmudic citations and a lot of good sources. So you even can go to those sources. Um, so, um, I'm I like some of his other views, but there are a few views that I go, um, okay. Don't mind the questions. And if other folks who view this, I don't know, they may not like the questions, but that's okay. That's part of what I'm here for. So if they're here for the teaching, they're also going to hear where there's some good resources. And I want people to know where good resources are. Folks, if you see citations in my PowerPoints, um, I'm not saying that those sources are good as far as they're all believers, because I do make use of the Talmud. But let me just let you know this. Um, they're good secondary sources to prove points, but if I use them in a PowerPoint, I'm pretty sure that they're worthwhile to use, at least for the points. If I use them and I quote them on key points in my argument, you have to know that I consider them good sources, or I wouldn't do that. So I'm only going to give you guys the best I can find, either to make a point in the argument, like a Jewish source that shows that Dr. Singer or some other polemicist is not being honest in some way, is not quoting the facts, or as far as those sources making the point themselves. Um, but I won't put sources up that I think are really unreliable. I don't do useless news and world report, U.S. News and World Report, as far as apologetics and theology, um, deliberately. So I'm, you know, that's just a clue. That's why I give you the citations in the PowerPoint, because I want you to have that material and I want you to examine it and have the possibility to check the source out for yourself too. You could get back to me and say, I looked up this guy and he has no expertise in this area, or he's been discredited. But at least you can do the research. Well, we're going to get started now. Some folks were able to join us for prayer this afternoon. I probably will do that again. I know that's via Zoom, but it was so good to see people's faces. I like praying for people and seeing them. So you can do that. You can also use your browser again, but I'm thinking of doing more of that. And then having like an after broadcast the next day or something where we can do Q&A and just, go over some things, or you can comment on some things. I'm going to be watching that though. We did have a few visitors. I want the extra visitors, but if I know there's someone who's visiting, who's just there to learn, um, I reserve the right, if someone like Exodus 21:20 comes in and wants to be a part of the Zoom meeting, I'll welcome sharing with him. I'll welcome taking his questions, but if that becomes overbearing, you guys understand who are watching the video. We want the new people. We want them to come in. I don't even mind sharing with them or answering questions, but we want to make sure that it stays nice. So let's get started for tonight. I hope all of you are doing well and settling in to the present situation. I know it's a little nutty right now. I think some of us would just love to go anywhere and do anything that was godly or acceptable morally, just to go see a movie or sit in an actual Starbucks. But that's where we're at now. Be well, stay safe, Try to honor the rules that are there to help people, uh, and take care of yourselves. And if you have family members, an older father, my dad's 90, check in on him, see how he's doing if you can. This is a weird time. Let's transition to the PowerPoint for tonight, because it'll be a weird time whether I transition to the PowerPoint or not. We're going to continue as far as the directions that the disciples are given. So we're right in Matthew 10. We didn't hit everything. And we want to look at these instructions in terms of the danger and the commitment that Jesus expects from those who are sent by him. So this will be very good. By the way, I know that Jesus was talking to the apostles here. We want to keep things in their context. But does it apply to you too? Yes, it does. Okay? It does apply to you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. Does that apply by extension? Yes, the Great Commission was given to the church. We're told to be witnesses in Acts. Jesus is still speaking, but it extends beyond them to us. The Great Commission was not rescinded. We're still in the business. Some of this is going to apply to us indirectly. Some of these instructions are particularly time sensitive. So we look at the general principles that we're going to find and see how they apply to us. But we understand that uniquely the apostles are being sent out. There are some things they're going to face given the time in history and who they're dealing with that you may not directly face at this point in history. Let's look at the beginning of the pericope, 11 through 15. So that's the beginning of the pericope that we're dealing with. Now, in whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and stay there until you go out. And when you go into a household, greet it. And if the household is worthy, let your peace come upon it. If it's not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whosoever does not receive you nor hear your words when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust from your feet. Assuredly, I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So that's the first set of the instructions we've been given. Now, remember earlier, they were told some things related to their trip. Earlier, they were told to rely on God for the provision. We talked about this being the beginning of what is known as faith missions. I'm not sure why there are two different models, but there are within the Christian church. Missionaries are often faith ministry. Doesn't mean pastors don't have faith. What it basically means is that they raise their support as opposed to being salaried. And so that's the way that ends up working. And that's where we sort of left off. 11 begins with a Greek word indicating the idea now, and that represents a switch in the pericope in my mind, where some additional instructions are being given as far as when they actually end up, beyond the instructions that were given before. Let me not get ahead of myself. The instructions before had to do with journeying and making the journey. The instructions now deal with the exact instructions related to entering a city and town, because they were supposed to go from town to town in the area and do the ministry, demonstrate the signs of the king, demonstrate they were authenticated, and then give the message of the king, which was authenticated by the signs of the king. So now they're giving procedural information. Jesus is saying, this is the procedure you need to follow. These aren't the rules or instructions about how you're to journey. This is the procedure when you actually enter a city. And so we're dealing with verses 11 through 13. Whenever you enter a city whatever city or town you enter into, inquire of it who is worthy. We just read that. Stay there till you go out. When you go into a household, greet it. If the household's worthy, then let your peace come upon it. If it's unworthy, let your peace return to you. And so these are the exact instructions. Whenever they entered a city or town, these were the exact instructions they were supposed to repeat. Now, where's the first command? Now, I look for things like commands. They're in the imperative in the Greek, so you have a mood. You also have a command mood in the Hebrew. And you have some ways that that's experienced. But when I'm looking over a passage, I'm looking for the grammatical features as they relate to the whole. And I'm looking for features that really jazz me. I get jazzed by God's like this, you do this. Okay, the way God is, this is how you do this. The indicative imperative. Because God is, you shall. I get excited by light to heavy arguments. I look for commands. I look for descriptions of God or his character. I look for reasons in order that. This is the first imperative in the passage in this pericope. And you see the Greek up there. Now it's in the aorist, which we generally translate as past tense. The aorist isn't that simple. Greek tenses are nuanced and they are a little different, but this is an imperative second person plural. So it's yous guys. Whenever yous guys, you group of apostles, go into a city, this is what you're to do. Now, I immediately go back to the Septuagint because I want to know what Hebrew concepts convey the same idea as the Greek word. Especially because remember, we're in Matthew and this is written to a highly Jewish audience. So they're going to make the connections conceptually between the Greek word and the original Hebrew idea. And when I looked up this word and I went back to my Septuagint, I found two Hebrew words. Darash, which you've heard me use before. Okay? And then there's another one. Bachan. All right, well, I don't think that's the vowel pointings. I think it's bechen are the vowel pointings, but they aren't listed. Those are the two Hebrew words, and they have the idea of seeking. Now, darash is used for an explanation of a Torah passage. You were seeking the meaning. Okay, it's used a lot for seeking, inquiring, to engage in a careful search in order to acquire information. So you're going to go into a town and you're going to inquire. We're going to see how that's going to end up working. I used Lull and Needham there. Is that an excellent resource? That's an incredibly excellent resource. It organizes the Greek words according to domain, what they relate to. Words that are agricultural organized, words that have to do with, it's set up by concept. And it's an incredibly good resource. And if you had it and you turn to page 330, you would find the reference there. See, you can always check up on these. But this is a thorough search. This is an inquiry in order to get information. When you go into a town, you're going to scope it out. You're going to check it out. I know it doesn't look good on a missionary's pie chart, but sometimes when I go to a new area to witness or something, I want to scope out the area. I want to see what the lay of the land is and prayerfully consider, where could I set up? What are the best places to set up as far as traffic flow? Where do I see something happening? Where are the crowds gathering in this particular environment? Where might other believers be? I'm going to scope out that territory. And this is the idea of kind of doing that. Scoping out. What are you supposed to look for? Well, I might look for traffic flow, but they're supposed to look for hospitality. We're going to talk about that worthiness there. But hospitality would include some openness. Now, if the town immediately kicked you out, you'd have a good idea. You walk into a town and immediately there's a riot and you're forced out of town. Okay, you know something right there. And so they were supposed to scope it out. Now, as far as a house, what you're looking for is hospitality. We're going to talk a little bit about that because hospitality is a terribly important thing in the Mideast and in the ancient world. But it gives you an idea. How are you received? Is the idea. Hospitality is beyond just being a great indicator, but it indicates something about the people. Okay, it indicates something about the town. And so it was more than just a custom, it was a demonstration of faithfulness to God. In the Jewish mindset, offering hospitality had to do with faithfulness to God. It was a virtue, it was what was expected. Some of the reasons for that have to do with the ancient world. Now, it's still true. When I went to Israel, the Bedouins still practice this type of hospitality. You'll be invited into the tent. Now, modern Israelis don't live in a tent. They have houses, some of which are pretty nice. But the idea is that hospitality is considered a virtue. In fact, what we're going to see is, first of all, that it goes back to Abraham. And Abraham's kind of the model. How did Abraham deal with strangers? Well, we have an incident that we can look at. Genesis 18, 1 through 6. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth tree, and so he was sitting by the tent door in the heat of the day. Now, I'm going to give you some insight I didn't put into this slide. See, there's a good reason to tune in. This chapter follows Abraham's circumcision as an adult. And I rated this not for children, so I can get away with this at the risk of letting you know too much. That surgical procedure is a little harder on 80 and 90-year-olds than it is on the 8th day. Enough said, but enough that I don't get the G rating for tonight, okay? The rabbis say that this is an indication of why it is important to normally visit the sick, not necessarily with the coronavirus, okay, but under normal conditions. Why is it a good deed or a mitzvah to visit the sick? Because God visited the recovering. And this is what they point to. God's visit to Abraham. So, God appears to him by the terebinth tree. He was sitting at the door in the heat of the day, convalescing. He lifted up his eyes, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. This tells us that God didn't visit him in a vision, that actually you have 3 individuals. Now, they aren't your average men. Don't be fooled by that. We know that from the context. And he saw them, and what does he do? Now, remember, he's recovering. This is what's so amazing to me. I mean, is he a hospitable guy or what? Okay. And so Abraham does what? He demonstrates hospitality here. He ran from the tent to meet them. He must have recovered somewhat, and he bowed to the ground. Now that's showing proper respect, okay? And said, Lord, if I found favor in your sight, literally favor in your eyes, by the way. It's literally chen, which is the word we get grace from, by the way, or the word related to grace. It's often translated grace. If I found grace in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let me get a little water be brought and wash your feet. Remember, open-toed sandals, sand, crusty, ew, not comfortable. And rest yourselves under the tree, and I will bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh your hearts. And it may be that you may pass by, after that, you may pass by, in so much that you've come to your serve. In other words, let me serve you. I'm recovering. Let me serve you and demonstrate hospitality, show kindness to you. And if I found favor in your eyes, if I found grace in your eyes, be willing to condescend to let me show grace to you. Wow. Uh, and so, and they said, do as you have said. And so Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah, goes into his wife, says, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes. Bread baking time. Bake these guys something. Now, something's added to that. It's not just a bread meal. Okay, curds and meat are added, which, by the way, means Abraham mixed milk and meat. So much for the kosher God. Not mixing milk and meat is one of the kosher laws. Does this relate to us, though? See, hospitality is a mark of the upright person. Does this relate to us? Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some have unwittingly entertained angels. Hebrews 13:2. Now, here's what's so cool about that. That's literally what happens to Abraham. The writer of Hebrews is thinking back to Genesis 18. That's what's going on in his head, most likely. This directly rates back. Abraham entertains these 3 gentlemen. We find out that 2 of them are just angels, and one of them is more than just an angel. And so the writer of Hebrews, who is writing to a Jewish audience who is steeped in the Old Testament, knows this full well. And so he's thinking right back to that. And so it's commanded for the people of God to be hospitable. Now, I know we live in different times right now, but under normal conditions, this is what would be expected. In fact, I'm going to turn there. There's a difference between the qualifications for an elder and for a deacon. There are 2 different qualifications that are required for a church elder that are not required for a deacon. So this isn't even on your slides, but this is extra. Okay, a bishop or deacon, episkopos, overseer, must be blameless, husband of 1 wife. Okay, those are temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, and able to teach. Not given to wine, not violent or greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. He who rules his own house well, having his children in submission. If a man does not know how to rule his house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he falls into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony with those who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Now, those are elder qualifications, but notice it said hospitable and able to teach. Now, when I go down to deacons in 1 Timothy 3, and I was doing 1 through 7, now I'm in 8. Keep your finger, if you are turning, keep your finger back where we were, okay? Deacons likewise must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to too much wine, not greedy, holding to the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. Let those who be let these also first be tested, and let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. What's missing there? Well, 2 of the qualifications that are missing is hospitable and able to teach. Did you notice that? Elders must be hospitable. Let me tell you what that doesn't mean. It doesn't mean their house is perfectly clean. Okay? What it means is that they show a love of strangers. They're willing to make people comfortable in their house, and they're willing to meet their needs while they're there. They generally are welcoming. And so that's a difference between elders and deacons. If you're looking for a reason for that, it's most likely because the church met in the home of elders whereas deacons went out and served. In the case of the beginning of the office, they served tables, but they also met needs. So they would go to the people. The church would meet in the elder's home. And so he has to be fairly hospitable because all these people are coming in and they're having services there. There weren't any church buildings by and large for the church. It's after 100 AD that you see churches meeting as a whole in buildings. This whole thing with church buildings is new. Actually, doing the cyber churches in homes, if other people were coming to our homes, would be very much, we'd be meeting personally though. See, that's the difference. Now we're isolated. But if we were doing church and people were meeting in homes, and sharing that way, and then you had teaching in homes, house churches, you would be somewhat close, because Christians didn't have access to all those buildings. And so that's basically what happened there. And so hospitality becomes a main thing. And so it's something there to look for when you go into a town. They're to look for that. And for us, it's an indication that hospitality still is important. But it's more than just that. Uh, it's going to have to do with receptivity. The welcoming into their homes has to do with hospitality, but it also has to do with receptivity, especially on the town level. Let's face it, the town isn't going to invite you into their home. How do we know if a town's worthy? Well, we know if a town's worthy because of receptivity. Now, I quoted Werner Foster. I'm going to say German Förster in his Greek entry on the word worthy in the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. Also an excellent resource. A man is worthy of the gospel as and because he receives it. All thought of merit is excluded from the nature of the gospel. The worthiness has to do with receptivity. It is not that they're worthy because of some sort of great work as opposed to others. They're worthy because of receptivity. And that's the idea here. And so we're talking about receptivity. Okay. Now, what about this giving of the peace? You know, there's some things the high church does that are kind of nice. I wouldn't legislate them. Okay. But I could relate to them when I visit some churches, when I'm invited to speak at, say, an evangelical Lutheran church. They have, the Anglican Church has what's called the giving of the peace. I am Jewish. We greet each other with shalom. In fact, the old greeting, I know it's not the modern Israeli street greeting, okay? But the old giving was shalom aleichem, and the proper response would be aleichem shalom. I hear this echoed with some of my Arab brothers and sisters in the Lord, where they'll say salam aleikum and aleikum salam, which is the Arabic equivalent of shalom. And so this giving of peace was not just a mere nicety. In fact, the Greek is up there. There's a command there. Let your peace be upon that household or on that town is actually in the command form. It's an aorist active imperative third person singular. So there are two possible conditions. If the home is worthy, let your peace, virtually as a command, be upon them. If they're unworthy, then your peace comes back to you. And that's what I said. It's a wonderful greeting. And the response to that greeting, let's say I said to you, Shalom Aleichem, peace to you, and you did not greet me likewise. See, that would be letting me know. That would be letting me know that that would be disrespectful. You don't respect me because you're not returning my peace to me. You're not returning peace to me. I have wished you peace. I have sent out. I have given you peace, and you have not returned the peace. Yes, someone asked whether Islam borrowed the saying. Yes, they did. Muhammad apes a lot of things from Christianity and Judaism, and that's an aping, virtually. But the point is, the way you respond to my greeting tells me how you feel about me, and I like that. Some churches still do it. Even some Baptist churches do it on Easter. The greeting, I'm going to miss that this Easter. Christ has risen, and the proper response is Christ is risen indeed. Christus anaste. Those sorts of greetings were very much a part. And so if it met with an unwelcome response, the peace would return. Now notice what Jesus doesn't say. He doesn't say to fight them. He doesn't say to be ugly or nasty. You just extend your peace to a worthy household, and if the household's unworthy, you just let the dust, shake the dust off your feet. Move on. You're done there. It's over. Move on. You've got other towns you need to hit. Move on. And don't worry, the peace you extended will return to you. But that really kind of lets us know something. Their judgment in these towns for not responding to the light given is going to be nasty. I went to Lang and his commentary on Matthew. The land of Sodom, the inhabitants of these doomed cities, was higher. The spiritual offer rejected was greater. The spiritual offer rejected, the greater the sin. That's a general principle. In Sodom, only a weak testimony of Lot was heard. Lot had some problems, but rejected. The evangelists mark the climax of guilt. Unbelief is a second fall. Now, the idea that Lang is getting to here is that where there is more light, there is more accountability and thus more judgment if that light's rejected. Folks, a general principle in my mind that I'm pretty certain of is that human beings respond to any light from God. God gives them more light. In other words, spiritual light responded to even before salvation creates additional opportunity for God to work. He will use that. And I believe in pre-evangelism. I don't know how that works with the sovereignty, but I believe it's a relationship. And God draws men, and he draws them, and his drawing includes their responses also. Light rejected creates hardness. So if I see someone who isn't ready to be saved yet, but they're asking good questions, I know that they're responding. But if I see someone who is rejecting even the light they have, I know that they're hardening themselves. And they will be hardened as they're hardening themselves. It's a both and. And so greater light rejected means hardening and ultimately greater judgment. And so Jesus could say, it'll be worse for these cities. It'll be more tolerable. And I looked up the Greek word, and tolerable is not a bad translation. It's a good translation. It will be more bearable. Listen to what Jesus is saying. Assuredly, I say to you, it will be more bearable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So yes, there are levels of judgment, and that's the more bearable there. And you can actually see the Greek word. So, I mean, the Greek word supports this. Are there levels of judgment? Yes, there are. You know, my dad used to say, I don't like your gospel because it doesn't matter what I do. Your God doesn't care if some people are worse than other people. He doesn't care. If they accept Jesus, you're fine. If you don't accept Jesus, the punishment is all the same, regardless of what you did. And I said, Dad, no, you have it wrong. Okay? Now, try this for a refrigerator magnet saying, your faith determines your destiny. Your actions determine degree. Did you catch that? Your faith determines your destiny. Either you believe in Jesus or you're believing in something else. I don't think anyone is believing in nothing. Everybody is trusting something. Your faith determines your destiny. Your actions determine degree. And so, yes, there are levels of judgment. There are also levels of reward. Because God honors what honors him. It's not because I'm being honored because I'm a nice guy. God will honor what honors him. If I do that which honors him, he will honor it because it honors him. Now we get into the tough stuff. The stuff that we're less acquainted with, but we need to hear it. Ideo, ego, epistalo in the Greek. I, and it's literally I myself, sort of, I mean, it's literally like that. Okay, it's that intense. Behold, actually, it's behold, ideo. Ego is I, epistalo, I send. And really, there should be a word for you right after that. Jesus is the one who's doing the sending. Whose idea is this? This is Jesus' idea. Whose idea is pressing you into service and saving you so that you can serve the kingdom? It's God's idea. However, they're going to face extreme danger. Good comment in the queue. I'll get back to it later. Some do make a confusion there. The judgment seat of Christ is related to reward. So that's a good point being made. Check it out in the comments. Where does he send them, though? He sends them out as sheep. Now, he doesn't mean that they're really sheep. We'll get to that. Okay? But there's danger. The idea here is there's an idiom. If you put sheep in a bunch of wolves, they'll get torn to shreds. Those sheep are in imminent danger. They will face danger. And so they are going to be really kind of facing danger because the people they're being sent among, they're going to be wolves there. And so they're getting sent out into an environment that is hazardous. What are you going to do? Not go? No. You're going to practice discernment. Discernment's gotten a bad name these days. Christians need to learn to discern. And so they're to practice discernment. They're to deport themselves with the wisdom of serpents and the simplicity or harmlessness of doves. That's Lang again commenting on the scripture. But I thought, ooh, how do I do that? How do I understand that? You know, what is the wisdom of serpents? How many smart snakes do I know? And are doves really harmless, like deliberately? How do I understand these pictures? They're to be shrewd yet harmless. Now, if any of you guys are looking for movies to watch and you have access to old movies, there's a movie called The Robe. Okay, now it's not perfectly biblically accurate, but it does portray Jesus as the Son of God, and it's really kind of a good movie. There's this centurion who gets pressed at the last minute to be part of those that crucifies Christ. And he ends up being haunted by this. and terrified, and the Roman emperor discerns him. The crazy thing is they think that the reason he's bewitched is because of the robe. No, we know better. Okay? And his serpent, of course, runs away, kind of disgusted at the whole thing. And it's a long, long story, but it's a wonderful movie. And the female actress does a good job. I've seen her in other things. It's big name. It's old Hollywood, when Hollywood still had some respect for Judeo-Christian worldview. Okay, a long time ago. Far, far away in a distant land. This actually happened. And so this centurion is brought in front of Nero. We know Nero wasn't a nice guy. Okay? And he's talking about another emperor, and the emperor is doing his thing and says, you believe in another, emperor sort of thing, and, you're a centurion. Where's your loyalty to Rome? And there's this whole wonderful scene, and he makes the comment that, Jesus's kingdom is not of this world. And then he says, well, men are imperfect, and the emperor gets all bugged. They have a great Nero, too, because you really can dislike him. And he says, kingdoms, the kingdoms of men are imperfect. Are you telling me I'm imperfect? And the soldier does this brilliant thing. He says, Your Highness, I am on trial here, not you. And there's the subtlety, the shrewdness, the way he turns it around. He's harmless. He doesn't accuse the emperor of anything, not that he couldn't. But he turns it around. Wait a minute. You're not the one on trial. We're not commenting on whether you're good or not. I'm the one on trial. And takes the focus totally off the emperor and shrewdly puts it back on himself and the issue of what he believes. And I only tell this story because this is such a cool illustration to me of being shrewd yet harmless. Because it's very hard for me to picture being shrewd yet harmless. Because a lot of shrewd people I know aren't harmless. And so this picture of, wow, what a clever thing to do. And I've seen it done with fellow apologists, and hopefully I've done it a few times too, where I've been shrewd yet harmless. I could think of one or two times in particular, but that's what they're to do. They're not to be harmful. They're not to cause harm, but they're to be shrewd. They're to be smart. They're to be clever. We might say street smarts, or aware, or discern. People can be dangerous. Some people don't get this. When I was a young kid, I was very, very gullible. But someone said I also was very open-hearted. Maintaining one and not losing the other is difficult. How do I know people can be dangerous? Oh, because Jesus tells me they can be dangerous. Beware of men, for they will deliver you up to their councils and scourge you in their synagogues. Beware of men. Be careful. People can be dangerous. Treachery will occur. Treachery is hard to take, but treachery will occur. They will deliver you to their councils and scourge you in their synagogues. Now understand that at this point, he's talking to a Jewish audience under the jurisprudence of the Sanhedrin and under the jurisprudence of the local synagogue. All right, you attend somewhere, that synagogue can kick you out, or make religious claims about you that are unjust. Take action. Synagogues could discipline. And the Sanhedrin was there, so that's the context. We're no longer dealing with the Sanhedrin. But beyond that, There's also non-Jewish legal authorities. Look at this. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. What this persecution will do is result in the gospel being spread. Well, why? Because other people are going to hear it. In these trials, people would hear the gospel who might not be within the circle or reach of these apostles. But because he was brought in front of governors in Acts, the gospel was preached to the governors and those who were their advisors and surrounded them, and kings and those who were their advisors, and maybe even households that would not have heard it as a testimony. Now, understand something. The word that we often translate testimony is the word we get martyr from. We often think about martyrdom only in terms of the fact you died, which, yes, that's an end result in martyrdom, but it's not the death that's being looked at. The death is the end result of the fact that they gave testimony. God isn't looking to kill his servants. God's looking to the gospel going forth. Now, there's another party that doesn't like that so much. And by the way, the gospel's still going forth. What do I do then? What am I to do? Well, this is neat. Jesus gives them instructions. This is going to be a scary time. This is pretty terrifying, being thrown into a cell without the amenities. No color TV, no exercise courtyard. Folks, probably no indoor plumbing. I'm sure of that. This is not a nice place to be. Okay? You don't know what's going to happen to you. People are getting a taste of that. The insecurity of not knowing the future. It's scary, not knowing what's going to happen to you. It's frightening. What are you to do when they do? Well, here's what you're not to do. Jesus doesn't tell them what to do. He tells them what not to do. He gives them a negative command. One of the ways of doing a negative command is to use a type of verb mood called the subjunctive. Now you're going, what does that mean? That is the type of verb I use when I'm speaking about a possibility. Something may happen. I hope something's happened. Let something happen. Let something not happen. Those verbs of potentiality. We call that the mood of potentiality. Okay? It may happen. It's a potential situation or a potential condition. We refer to that as the subjunctive in Greek. But if I put a negative in front of it, a not word, okay, we call that a negative particle, okay, then it carries the force of a negative command sometimes. So even though it's subjunctive, Jesus is giving them a negative command. It's not do not worry because this is a suggestion. It's not do not worry because this is going to be better for you. It's do not worry because you're being commanded not to worry. Do you know how hard that is? You're being commanded not to give in to a certain emotion or attitude. And for me, worry comes naturally. Okay? It's part of that Eastern European, French, German, Jewish angst. What can I say? And so it's a negative command. What are you to do in the face of all of this? Being delivered up to the Sanhedrin, being delivered up to kings, being delivered up to governors. Do not worry. Do not worry about whether you're going to get out. In other words, Jesus just gave you a get out of jail free card. That's not what he's saying, because the rest of the verse gives it to me. Okay, and there's the Greek. What you will say. What don't you worry about? You don't worry about how to answer when you're on trial for your faith. Your presentation is guaranteed. Your preservation is not. Now hear that again. because that's just a really cool way to understand this. Your presentation is guaranteed, but your preservation is not. That's hard. Okay, that's hard for Westerners. Doesn't Jesus guarantee me a happy, clappy life? You know, at the risk of mentioning a certain preacher who's into the prosperity gospel and has become quite big in Texas. I mean, isn't that guaranteed? God has promised you your best life ever. No, Jesus didn't guarantee them the best life ever. He guaranteed them being able to do the work of the kingdom and that he would meet their needs. Generally, as they were doing his work, he didn't guarantee them a smooth road. Yes, they will not die until he's through with them doing what they're supposed to do. But that's not the point. The point is he didn't guarantee a happy, clappy, comfortable life. I don't even like that sometimes. I don't know that I like that right now. But that's the reality. In this world, you will have tribulation. And then Jesus goes on and says that they should know that they should take courage or be encouraged, for I have overcome the world. Do not worry about what you say. Why shouldn't I worry about what I should say? Because God's in charge. God will make sure that I know what to say. God will make sure I know what to say. Why? So I look good? No. God will make sure I know what to say because his honor is on the line. Nice little refrigerator magnet saying. God's honor is on the line, so your enabling is sure. And I think that's true as far as our service to God is concerned. Since God is honor is on the line, he will enable. But how do I know this from this passage? It will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. Verse 20, for it is not you who speak. Now, he's not saying nothing's coming out of their mouths. He's not saying that God instantly puts them into a coma and just speaks through them as if they were a ventriloquist dummy. That's not the point here. What they're going to say, God is going to work through their minds and what they know and who they are in such a way that the Spirit of God will be speaking through them. One of the things I love about our God is he works through us without obliterating us. You say, what does that mean? Well, in the New Age movement and in satanic things, God possesses. Okay? In other words, the obliteration of the other person is in mind. Okay? In the case of God, God works through the person. He doesn't obliterate the person. In other words, unlike a forced possession, it is a willing filling. I like that. Instead of a forced possession, it is a willing filling. The individual continues to exist. The individual continues to be used. The individual's personality and talents continue to be used. You will be given what to say. Did Peter sound like Paul? No, Peter sounded like Peter. Paul sounded like Paul, but when the Holy Spirit was speaking through him, the Holy Spirit was speaking through both of them as Peter and Paul uniquely. That is so exciting. So what can we get out of this that really will help us nowadays? Well, here's what we can get. Here's the conclusion. God will enable us and use us in times of peril. Isn't that a wonderful word for tonight? As we go through Matthew, in the midst of the coronavirus, a time of trouble or peril, God will enable us and use us. God's still in the business of doing that. And so that's our conclusion for tonight, and it's a very fitting conclusion. He's given them instructions about when they go into a town. He's told them exactly what they should not worry about, but he's warned them they're going to have trouble, and he's guaranteed that he will enable them and use them in the peril that they're going to face. And in the same way, using a nice Cole Villomer argument, God will enable and use us in this time of peril. So that's where we ended up tonight. It's been good. There'll be more. Check the comments, and tomorrow probably I will figure out how to put this in this description. But you are welcome to join us. Um, I will also try to put where you can get a free Haggadah so that you can follow along the Haggadah I'll be using. I just want to let you know it's not the Haggadah I traditionally use. I traditionally use my own. So I may be doing a little bit more reading from it than I normally do because I have to get used to Chosen People's version. But I welcome you to join us. Monday, Thursday is the first night of Passover, so we can talk about redemption on the Feast of Redemption and how it relates to the Messiah who gives us redemption. I don't think there are any questions or anything. I will keep you posted, and at some point we'll probably be doing this different. So, hey, thanks for the encouragement. Numbers on YouTube fluctuate, but you guys getting something out of it, that's what makes it all worthwhile. YouTube can have its numbers, but God's word's going out, and that's what excites me. And somebody's being blessed by it and being equipped by it. So that is great. Uh, I think the families come back in. Now you're saying why were they out? They had to run out to get something. So we're not being nasty. And it was actually, in such a way anyway, they're back. They were out with good reason, and they're back with good reason too. And so I'm going to look forward to saying hi to the family. Uh, and all of you guys. It was great having some folks I haven't seen for a while. So that is absolutely wonderful.